Hey guys, ThePerfectG here, and today I'm bringing you the final portion to the solo ohm guide. In this video, we'll be going over how to tackle the head phase whether you're a beginner or a well-practiced solo raider. If you find the video helpful, consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing for more Perfect G content in the future. Enjoy! For the head phase of ohm, you have several options for weapons. The best choice is the Twisted Bow, followed by the Dragon Hunter crossbow, the Bowfa, the Dragon crossbow, and the Blowpipe and Rune crossbow. These weapons have different options for methods, so I'll leave timestamps in the description so you can scrub through the video to find methods that match your specific gear. During the head phase, Ohm will turn his head and attack on the same 4-tick cycle as all other phases. He retains all of his phase-specific auto attacks and Smite Orb attack. The only attacks he loses are his specials, the crystals, lightning, and pairing portals. Instead of these, Ohm will randomly shoot out a pair of water pools with no cooldown, meaning he can drown you pretty quickly. To avoid this attack, simply stand on any water pool 1 tick before Ohm's next attack. If you have water spells for flame walls, you can stand a little bit longer when you're starting, but if you're only on the pool for the one specific tick, then you can't be trapped in a flame wall as you dodge it. Starting the head phase can be a bit tricky. When you finish the final hands phase, you'll run to the side of the room where Ohm is not looking. Meaning, if you finished off the melee hand, Ohm will face right, so you go left. If you finish the mage hand last and you're standing on the left half of the room, then Ohm will face left, so you go right. There are a few things that could shift his head direction, but just go the direction he is not facing. When you reach the far side of the room, attack and then run on the same tick that Ohm turns his head. And remember, you are predicting this click based on timing rather than reacting to his head physically turning. The next step depends on your weapon. The first weapon to go over is Blowpipe, and I'm going to have to speak very bluntly here. It sucks. With Missouri, it's barely better than Rune Crossbow, and with Void, it's slightly worse than Rune Crossbow. The 2-tick attack speed of the Blowpipe makes it harder to dodge rocks and reach pools, which lessens the DPS even further. So even when your DPS calcs say Blowpipe is better, it's way less practical, making it only valuable as a spec weapon. And even then, a slot for a brew would be more beneficial. If you're confident enough to solo Ohm with just a Blowpipe, then you would know what you're doing anyway. So now we move on to the Bowfa. You can do methods similar to the Blowpipe, but you'll take more damage and still have a hard time reaching pools. The standard method for Bowfa is 6-2, and a more click-intensive method is 5-1. The best examples of these methods that I could find will be linked in the description by Nerf Coffee. All I did was die trying to replicate it, and this player is phenomenal handling Bowfa. If you're going to be stuck with a Bowfa for a long time until DHCP or Tbow, I would highly recommend checking out their videos. The next method is one that I personally recommend for anyone learning solos to do, 1-0. You can do this with any ranged weapon, however, due to the nature of losing ticks, it's typically best with a Tbow or a crossbow on accurate instead of rapid. To start, when the hands go down, go to the side of the room Ohm is not facing and attack. As long as you run back across the room in time, Ohm won't hit you. When you reach the other side, attack again, run back across, and repeat. The general rule is that you attack Ohm once on each side of the room, and there's 2 different ways to do this. When you run across the room and reach the other side, you attack, run back across, attack again, and repeat. You're attacking from the far side of the room 1 time each time you get there. The alternative to this, though, is instead of attacking on the far side of the room, you can attack as you cross over the middle. This is beneficial to know because if you attack on the far side of the room and don't move until it's time to, rocks could fall on you, in which case you may lose your 1 attack. However, if you attack as you cross the middle, you can focus more on pathing rather than making sure you get to the far side quickly to attack. If you time it correctly, you can get an additional Blowpipe hit on each side of the room, making the method 2-0. However, because the Blowpipe doesn't add much DPS and the amount of effort added to do this method is less enticing, it isn't very practical. Some normal mistakes that could happen are being early or late. If you ever happen to leave the far side early when doing 1-0, Ohm's head will stay in the middle and attack you. If you notice this right away, you can go backwards to the side you came from and time it again to run across. If you don't notice right away and you still try to go backwards, you'll get caught in a flame wall if Ohm shoots one. My recommendation here for best practice is to continue running across the room even if you're early. Just don't stop and get caught in a flame wall. And if you happen to leave the far side late, you'll just tank a hit on the way across the room. Flame walls won't trap you as you run, but you'll have to account for this tick loss when you run back across again. The final method we'll go over is 4-to-1 head phase. As you progress through solo Ohm, this is the method you want to work on the most, and just as the method says, Ohm will attack us one time for every 4 hits we do. There's also a method called 3-to-1 that we won't be going over because it's basically just 4-to-1 but you skip attack number 3. It isn't much easier to do, and you lose a lot of DPS doing it, so we'll stick to 4-to-1. We'll call our hits for the 4-to-1 attack 1, 2, 3, and attack 4 respectively, and you can do this method regardless of what side Ohm is on or what side you start at. For simplicity's sake, we'll start on the same way as the other methods. When the hands die, go to the side of the room Ohm is not facing and do attack 1. Time running across the room by moving on the same tick Ohm turns his head. As you cross over the middle of the room, you'll do attack 2. When you reach the far side of the room, however, you won't be able to attack right away as your weapon is on cooldown. During the final tick of cooldown, just as Ohm turns his head to face you, you'll run 1 tick to the middle and do attack 3, and then run back across. If you don't run 1 tick, or 2 tiles, into the middle just before attack 3, you risk getting hit by a rock. Skipping this third attack entirely is the 3-to-1 method. And then as you cross back over the middle for the second time, you'll do attack 4, or 3 in the 3-to-1 method. Ohm will then turn his head towards the middle while you continue running, and then you repeat from there. As you get more consistent with solo Ohm, you'll be able to start the cycle right away from any part of the room. But if you ever get lost, you can do some 1-to-0 to get your timing back. Doing 1-to-0, the attack from the far side of the room, is the same timing you would do attack number 1 in the 4-to-1 example. Another example of noticing your cycle is similar to 4-to-1 with the melee hand. Ohm can be broken down into simple pattern recognition. If you ever cross over the middle of the room and Ohm does attack you, your next attack will be considered attack 4 of the 4-to-1 cycle. If you cross over the middle of the room and Ohm does not attack you, then your next attack will be considered attack 2 of the 4-to-1 cycle. There are a few mistakes commonly made during the fight that you'll learn to conquer with time, but a prime example. Let's say you're doing 4-to-1, you cross over the middle of the room and do attack 2, but you notice there's a random rock falling. If you're not high HP, you'll typically try to avoid this rock, but you'll lose at least 1 tick attacking late in most cases. My recommendation would be to just skip attack 3 and continue running, and as you run back across, you can attack again without getting hit. But because of pattern recognition, we would treat this as attack 2. Another way of looking at this is if you're going to lose that tick, you would just be doing a 3-to-1 cycle. And again, this is why we're mostly going over 4-to-1 as the main method. Most timing mistakes can be resolved by switching back to 1-to-0 and starting the cycle over again. But the key thing to note is that if you're ever going to be attacked by Ohm, always be ready to dodge a flame wall. Now, regardless of the weapon you use, there are some general tips you may want to know. Firstly, in regards to water pools, you still have to watch out for flame walls. If you're familiar with the tick to preemptively dodge flame walls, then you can stand 1 tick or up to 2 tiles away from a pool and run north or south onto it as a means to dodge that flame wall. These ticks will line up so you can just continue running after you dodge. If the pool is too far away to reach, which is easier to distinguish with time, just don't go. Continue your cycle. The pool heals Ohm, which means you'll get a few extra points. But just remember, the extra points caps at 3 sets of pools. If you get a crystal trail, you can actually do your cycle without losing ticks or getting hit, but if you aren't tile walking with perfect tick coordination, you may take some damage. And it's just better to take the 1 falling crystal than to keep getting hit by Ohm and lose DPS on top of that. And that same logic actually applies to acid trails as well. You'll be able to avoid almost all acid trail damage by going out of your weapon's max range and letting your character get dragged when you attack. However, this only prevents a couple ticks of acid damage, so I wouldn't worry about this unless you're doing extremely niche gear no preps. Again, just stay in the cycle. The extra damage doesn't really matter. The last thing I'll leave you with is some basics on the rocks falling. There's 1 rock that falls onto where the player stands every 4 ticks, and the rest are random. So it's not always guaranteed that you'll do the Ohm head with 0 rock damage. The way I like to avoid rocks is by moving diagonally and manually pathing across the room. You can think of this somewhat like a trapezoid or a hexagonal diamond in some cases. Basically, I move diagonally onto the far side of the room and exit it the opposite diagonal that I came from. Although sometimes I'll exit in a straight line, you typically want to move diagonally as much as possible. This way, you avoid rocks that would otherwise be in your way when you enter the far side of the room. Thank you guys so much for watching. I didn't want to miss any key details of 1 to 0 or 4 to 1, but if I did, feel free to let me know. If you have any questions regarding any of the methods, feel free to comment or reach out to me directly. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more Perfect G content in the future.